What Do You Do? The podcast that explores various occupations and industries and arms you with information about what that position entails and how someone gets that job. This show is for anyone who's ready for a career change or who's just entering the workforce. What will we discover today? Lean in and enjoy the show with your host, Chris.
Welcome to episode 3 of What Do You Do? The Career Podcast. In this episode, we meet with my friend Alan, who is a medical physicist. I never really knew what that was until I asked him, hey, what is a medical physicist? And it's one of those jobs that's kind of the unseen, behind-the-scene heroes when it comes to radiation therapy. I would like to go ahead and say this was the first episode I ever recorded. So there's a lot of things I learned when it comes to the different channels and audio levels, and this is all before that. So I apologize. I tried to clean it up as best as possible, and hopefully I can do it justice with the show. Before the interview, I would like to share a quote. It is, either you run the day or the day runs you. And that's by Jim Rohn. Anyways, on to the interview. I have Alan with me. He is in the medical physics field. How about you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what medical physics is?
Sure, I'd be happy to. The best explanation I've heard for it, and the shortest one, I suppose, is that we're essentially a pharmacist for radiation therapy. And most people think of pharmacists in terms of, giving out prescription medicine. But radiation therapy actually is generally a lot more technical than that, and involves, well, not that giving out medication isn't technical, but involves these machines that deliver, high energy X-rays and, electrons therapies, and you have radioactive sources that we actually will put in people temporarily or permanently. There's a lot of modes of delivering radiation therapy. But ultimately, the pharmacist and the medical physicist's job is to make sure that the doctor's prescription of radiation, so radiation, of course, is used to treat cancer mostly, but there are some other conditions, that the doctor's prescription for these treatments is implemented as safely and accurately as possible. So in that way, I suppose we're kind of like pharmacists, but it is kind of a different approach. So radiation therapy, maybe I can talk a little bit about, what would you expect if you were going to get radiation treatment? Would that be all right?
Yeah, that's perfect. That'd be a great example.
All right. So a patient who diagnosed with cancer, for example, maybe prostate cancer or breast cancer, those are some of the two most common we see. So when they come to get radiation therapy, there's a few different kinds of treatments, of course. Perhaps the most common kind is called external beam radiation therapy. And that's the kind where we have these big machines. They're called linear accelerators. And they generate these high energy X-rays that can penetrate deeply into your body and deposit energy in the tumor, ideally, of course. Of course, it will deposit energy along the way. But if we come in from a bunch of different angles, then essentially we can create this focus of radiation dose around the tumor and deliver more dose ideally to the tumor than to the adjacent organs. So that's the gist of it. Now the process of getting into from you stepping in the door to you getting a treatment involves a lot of important steps, right? I mean, you don't just jump on the table and you get treated. We got to know exactly what we're targeting, and we have to know it within a precision. And in fact, the precision we aim for is less than 2 millimeters error, right? So these days, anyway, it used to be a lot more, kind of, what is it, spray and pray? Have you heard that term?
Yeah.
But there's certainly instances where we still got to do that these days, But yeah, so we got to go through a process with this patient, to get them where when they lay down on this table under this big machine, we have the tumor within plus or minus 2 millimeters of where we want it, and we're going to shoot the radiation at it, right?
Yeah.
So that process involves, number one, we image the patient with a CT scanner. And so with the CT data, we can see your insides, right? So it's pretty fantastic, actually, these days, what the CT scanners can do. But we see your insides. We bring those images into what's called the treatment planning system. The treatment planning system has the capability of contouring your organs. So the physician, well, first of all, generally the physician, he's the one who knows what we're treating. Well, ideally, right? You'd like to think that he knows, and he does. That's what they're trained to do. And so we have to wait for them at that time to target essentially what they want, and to outline on these images where we want to put the radiation and how much radiation to put there. That's their domain, right? And so after that, of course, we can contour all of the organs that might get radiation dose. For example, if you're treating the prostate, do you happen to know what's right next to the prostate? There's a few things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, there's the rectum, which is obviously important for controlling your capabilities and, pooping, and the bladder and so forth. And I mean, these organs are important, and quality of life depend on them. Sexual function, obviously, is affected by prostate and targeting of the prostate with radiation or surgery or whatever the therapy would be. And so the doctor has to tell us where do we want to treat and how much dose we want to treat to. The doctor also specifies, okay, how much dose can I let the bladder get, or the rectum, or in the case of the breast, the heart sometimes can get a little bit of radiation dose and things. And so anyway, he'll contour that. Then the physicist or one of the physicists called a dosimetrist will do a treatment plan where they plan how they're going to treat, right? We can get into that more a bit later if you want. But ultimately, after the plan is complete, we'll then send it out to what are called radiation therapists. And they're the people who actually bring the patient into the room. And they download, of course, the treatment plan to the treatment console. And, of course, set up the patient to the correct location on the couch so that their tumor, their target, is within 2 millimeters at least. In fact, we do some procedures where we require 1 millimeter accuracy, which is pretty remarkable. And it gets pretty wild when you think about all the uncertainties there. And humans are kind of like a big tub of jelly,
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, to go through. But yeah, the patient, after they're set up correctly, we have actually on these treatment machines nowadays, they have what's called onboard imaging, where they can take images and and then line it up with where they were when they were scanned the first time with the CT scanner, so they can match up essentially exactly the same position. So sorry if this is long-winded, but that after they're all set up, then the therapist essentially hits the button to turn on the therapy and goes through every different angle of attack, I guess you'd say, and delivers all the radiation that was planned. So as you can see, there's several steps in there, and
right.
And every step of the way, errors can happen. And there's things that physicists are in charge of. For example, I don't know, you can think of even the CT scanner, right? The CT scanner provides these images, but are those images spatially accurate? When you're in this digital world and you have this picture and you have a digital ruler, is that when the ruler says, is it 1 centimeter, is it really 1 centimeter? If it can get, be off the calibration and give you wrong answers, So we do tests as medical physicists to ensure that the CT scanner is accurate. The CT scanner also provides information of what kind of material it is. Is it muscle or fat or whatever? And that affects the dose that actually will be delivered. So are the units of the pixel values, for example, in the image, are they accurate? So I mean, there's every step of the way. You can break it down into 20, maybe 100 even different components where it could go wrong, And so the physicist's job is to make sure we isolate where can it go wrong and perform tests at different frequencies to ensure that it's working correctly, and also participating, in writing the policies and procedures to help make it accurate. Participating in the treatment planning sometimes depends on how your clinic runs, of course, and how involved you are in that. Helping with actually going to some of these treatments, especially the more complex ones, to be kind of a consulting with the therapist and things. So yeah, that's kind of a broad overview. These machines are very complex. The accuracy we're looking for requires a lot of assurance that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, and so that's where we come in to make sure that it's done safely and accurately.
All right, Alan. So that was a pretty amazing rundown of the spectrum of duties that you might do. But with the medical field being as wide with different specialties and job roles, how did you figure out that this is something that you would like to do? I've never heard of a medical physicist until you and I really started talking about it.
It's a great question. I am not surprised. Most people haven't, and it's because it really is quite a specialized field. I think there's probably 6,000 or so medical physicists in the United States, and we work kind of in the background. So yeah, it's certainly not well known, I think, what we do. And I didn't know about it until I was a sophomore in college. I was in an electrical engineering program, bachelor's degree. And my mom had a friend, and I was visiting home over Christmas, and my mom said, "Hey, you should go visit so-and-so. He really loves what he does, and he's a medical physicist." And I was like, I'm not sure, why not? So I went to visit him at the hospital, and he actually had the cover off of a linear accelerator at the time. I still remember him kind of explaining some things about how the electron beam goes down this this waveguide and things, and that this is where whatever. I can't remember exactly what now that I know more about it, but what he tried to explain to me, that I thought, oh, that's cool. And but at the time, it struck me that this is neat. This is a really great way to apply engineering type approaches. In fact, some people might wonder how theoretical a medical physicist is, and I would actually argue we're almost more of engineers. Maybe that's because I started in engineering, but so I have that bias. But we're applying we're an applied physics field for sure. And but anyway, he showed me that, and I thought, well, this is a great way to apply this physics and engineering type skills to really helping people in a substantial way. And so that was something that interested me, and for some reason it kind of interested me more than doing the at the time the making electronics or computer chips or work. Electrical engineering is a very broad field, of course. Doing signal processing, there's lots of things you can do. But I just saw this as like a really direct, high impact kind of field, and so I continued correspondence with this friend of my mom's, and kind of got some tips from him of how I should enter the field, what I should be aware of, and he was super helpful. So that was key for me, was finding this guy who number one knew a lot about it. Obviously, he'd been practicing for probably at least 15, 20 years, and but also was really happy to share everything he knew as far as how to get into the field. So that's how it started for me, and so it kind of progresses there. Of course, I continued my electrical engineering degree, but then I got into grad school, which is where really the medical physics training takes place. Do you want me to get into how the training of medical physicists works generally?
Yeah, I think that'd be kind of neat because, again, doctors, go to medical school. And again, medical physicists, never heard of it until now. So I guess you said you went to graduate school and took off from there?
Yep. So medical physics actually has kind of undergone an interesting evolution just recently in terms of training. And there are, they just, within the last few years actually, have begun requiring that you attend or you graduate from a accredited program. And the accrediting body is called CAMPEP. and in order to get board certified. So the accredited programs are all graduate programs. They're master's and PhD programs, so 2 years, or PhDs can be, who knows, like, I guess, I don't know if you can do one in as little as 3 years, but probably 4 to 6, I would guess, maybe longer. Right. PhDs are, I have lots of friends who have done. I don't know tons of medical physics PhDs personally, so I can't speak too much to that. But friends who have done other PhDs in physics or whatever, and it can last way too long. But yeah. Anyway, those are the two ways in is these two different graduate degrees, and you have to go to accredited school now to be board certified. And the other thing you got to do in order to be board certified is now go into an accredited residency program. So, which I think is not unlike medical, doctors. And but now the accredited residency is 2 years, and after that you have essentially 1 more year of on-the-job training after you get a job, hopefully, out of residency. And then you can take the test to be board certified. Well, technically the test is 3 parts, kind of spread over several years, but that's the final test. That is when the earliest you can take it. So ultimately, before you're board certified, it would be 5 years minimum, I'd say. So if you did a 2 years master's, 2 years residency, then get a job, work for a year, and take the board exam, the final board exam, and then you're board certified. I've been board certified now, I guess, a year and a half or so. So I've been through the rigmarole, but it's the training I received. Just recently, also a new type of program has popped up called the Doctorate of Medical Physics program. So it's essentially the 2 years master's and the 2 years residency combined. And so that's the training that I received, and it was really quite phenomenal. I'm really glad that I got into that program. But yeah, so those are the different options. And to be frank with you, it's kind of been a rough time, I think, for the entering of the field. There's the barrier to entry is a little bit high right now because of these new regulations. A lot of people want to become medical physicists, as far as the numbers show, and there's only so many residencies, and as you can imagine, say you have 100 graduates per year and there's only 50 accredited residencies, and I'm pulling those numbers out of the air because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know there is quite a discrepancy between the number of people graduating from these programs and the number of residencies. So you get people who have this graduate training in a very specialized field who simply can't get into a residency for a year, maybe longer, depending on how competitive they are. So. But yeah, I got out right in as things were changing, and I was, I think, very fortunate to have a great program I was in. That I think I had a nice edge, and sometimes it's also not what you know, but who you know. But a connection, a friend of one of the teachers in my program. Who was also a medical physicist, we got connected, I guess, so that I got a job. But I think all my classmates and all the, in this particular program all found positions. But yeah, so that's kind of the gist of the training. But I guess if there's a moral of the story, if you are interested in getting into medical physics, which I think it's a fantastic field, I really do. I think it's just really a great place to be and an opportunity to really help people, like I said, that you're going to have to set yourself apart, go above and beyond if you want to make it, just kind of the way it is right now. It only like 10 years ago that when some new technology was coming out called intensity modulated radiation therapy, where it was so new, but also so game changing in radiation therapy that all the clinics were trying to get it, right? But this technology required some extra care in terms of implementing it and confirming, doing quality assurance to know that it's doing as what it's planning. The planning system says it's supposed to be doing. So you don't want to give people the wrong amount of radiation. That's really, really bad. So there was just apparently, from what I understand, I didn't live through this, but But you could essentially pick, where you wanted to live because there was so much demand for medical physicists. But things have kind of turned around at the moment, and who knows where it's going to go in the future. But that's where we're at now. So hopefully that gives you some insight. But that's the training, and that's kind of what you would expect.
What's kind of a generic question, but what's one of the best things, if you could think of one thing that you get the most satisfaction from with your current position?
That's a good question. I suppose it would come from, and this kind of maybe speaks also to one of the it's perhaps a compelling part, but also a scary part, right? So the fact is, when we're dealing with these treatments, and these are life and death situations for people, there are situations where mistakes are made in somewhere along the process, and when the physicist's ultimate job, and this is maybe speaks to the human nature of what brings satisfaction to you, but a lot of times it's those big events that happen that you save the day in some way, right? Those are I think have kind of the stronger emotional impact on you, that you really remember them. You're like, wow, man, I'm so glad I came to work today and I was here to help in this particular way, and to give my insight that my training has, given me the opportunity to do. But you might miss on perhaps the more important side of medical physics, which is identifying where errors might happen and making sure that everything is figured out and everyone is communicated to that needs to, so these don't happen. But to answer your question though, I have to say that those moments when something in a plan, when you can contribute something where that if you hadn't said something or if you weren't there, then the patient would have received a suboptimal treatment or maybe even the wrong treatment. And, it's not that medical physics is about adding safety nets and trying to be a safety net to ensure that everything is done, as I said, as the doctor prescribed. The medical field is kind of rife with issues with, where the wrong therapy is, the wrong foot is operated on and things and whatnot. These are things that can happen and do happen, unfortunately. But to be a part of the solution, I think medical physics in a very real way is maybe, especially, obviously within radiation oncology, we're almost the front line in terms of the people who prevent that kind of thing from happening. And so those things come up, that where you see something we do a lot of double checking, and we double check the plans that have been created, the treatment plans. We double check that it has been transferred correctly from one computer, from one system to another. We check everything that we can, and we find things that we see that, hey, this shouldn't be like this. We need to fix it, and this is why. And the physicist is in a special position because a lot of times you really know the answer why, you know why that it should be a certain way and what happens. You understand the physics of the radiation, which the radiation dose is kind of a really quite complex in some ways. Some ways it's simple, some ways it's complex, but it can be quite complicated in certain respects, depending on what kind of therapies and where you're treating and so forth. But you're in a very special position because you have insight that no one else has that can be really impactful, on a patient who, is expecting the best therapy you can give, obviously. So yeah, I think that's very satisfying to be a part of providing this therapy. Now, not a lot of times the things that we check, and perhaps if there's I'm preempting you. You're probably going to ask me what I like least, so I'll give you the chance to ask that.
So, Alan, what do you like least?
So, sorry, but so it, a lot of the tests we do can be a little bit mundane. There's this routine quality of some of the things we do. I can't give you an exact percentage of how much of my job is being creative, coming up with solutions, implementing new technologies, and that's all very exciting. And how much is kind of routine. Okay, I got to sit down with this patient's chart, and I got to look at these numbers and kind of make sure they all make sense and so forth. So it's an interesting mix of those two things, and in a way, I think that is kind of a good thing. It can be appealing, where you're not necessarily always exercising the same cogs in your brain. You know what I mean? That makes sense. So yeah, it's an interesting mix of creativity and kind of routine. But yeah, a lot of the tests we do, by nature of what they are, it's kind of like, okay, I gotta the procedure is very clear. I just got to push these buttons, but coming up with the right test to do, now that's something that we got to do, and fixing the test when we think, no, this isn't gonna be quite. This doesn't provide enough insight to recognize if there's truly an error here. Let's fix it, and those kind of things. That's where the medical physicist has a lot of insight. But yeah, we do a lot of tasks that aren't necessarily engaging, from a mental perspective. But
so if you have a patient come in, patient does the treatment, and then the patient leaves. Do you ever know if cancer goes into remission and everything was good, or do you find out, hey, the treatment's not working, the patient's no longer with us? Do you have that, that kind of stress?
That's a great question. So we, as a physicist, we're kind of in the background more than most medical professionals. I would say, to be frank with you, one of the things I wish we had more information on was the outcomes. But the thing about radiation therapy is, in most cases, well, so let me first express this, that there's two different types of radiation therapy. There's what's called definitive and palliative. And we do, I don't know if I'd say 50-50, but we do a significant fraction of both. And definitive radiation is where our goal is to cure the cancer, and we believe that there's a good probability that we can. And we're generally more aggressive, and the patient may have some side effects, from the radiation, because radiation, or because cancer is such a bad disease, obviously, that we want to hit it with everything we got that hopefully will cure it, right? But palliative is when the patient, for example, has metastatic cancer spread throughout the body, and it is causing pain in the back, for example. Sometimes metastasis is what it's called, is when it spreads through the body. Sometimes you get metastasis in the metastases, more than one, in the spinal column, the vertebrae, right? And so very painful, and the radiation can alleviate a lot of these symptoms. So there's a lot of cases like that. So I would say, of course, palliative, I guess to get back to what I was trying to say was that I kind of wish that we had more of a role in terms of this long-term follow-up and tracking. And I think there's room for that. In fact, there's some recent papers out about doing some more data mining in terms of retrospective analysis of these patients and things. This is something I think that will become more prominent in the future. But yeah, I wish that we had more information, and we have what's called chart rounds, where the doctor kind of explains what's happening with certain patients. Occasionally, we might hear certain information, especially if their patient comes back for a treatment, which happens. Like I said, there's these palliative treatments that you might get 2, 3, 4 or more, depending on the condition you have, where we can continue to apply therapy at different places to palliate pain or so forth, and to ease their pain. And but yeah, we sometimes learn about the outcomes, but sometimes not. Now, in medicine, the gold standard of evidence is the randomized clinical trials, right? And so these are controlled studies that are done with where people are randomly assigned to different arms of treatments, and then which are expected to be at least as good. The new therapy that they're testing should be at least as good, and ideally, right? But you don't know until you try, right? And then you have these long-term follow-ups over years. And that's the thing about, like I said, with especially definitive radiation therapy, a lot of times you don't know for years and years if the cancer is really gone. And that's one of the tough things about cancer is, survivorship of cancer is a lifelong thing, and so from my perspective, we're more involved mostly in the window of therapy, and then the long-term follow-up. The doctor, of course, is keeping tabs on them, but to the best of their ability. But yeah, we sometimes kind of get insights. And for example, when I'm doing a treatment plan, I often will ask the doctor, for example, we're treating where there's a particular organ nearby, and I'll have the thought of, how often do you see these certain side effects from this kind of therapy, especially if for the plan I'm working on, it's doing so much dose or to that organ that so how much do you see side effects? And he'll explain his clinical experience,
Right now, it seems like you love your job. And you love helping people and being a part of an in-game solution to help these people with cancer to eradicate it, which, I have family members that, have succumbed to cancer. I have friends that have succumbed to it. But then I also have the same token as, I have friends that are survivors and family that are survivors of cancer. But where do you see yourself, in the next 5-10 years from now? Do you see this being a long-term career, or is there any other, facets to medical physics that you might go down, or what do you think you might do?
Yeah, great question. I'd say, so most people get into medical physics do it for long-term careers. I'm kind of a little bit of a maverick, I guess, in terms of what I hope to accomplish. So as I mentioned, I'm electrical engineering undergrad. I have a bachelor's in electrical engineering, and I love programming. So in medical physics, as a tip, by the way, if you ever consider getting into medical physics, I think programming is really an edge in terms of a skill that's very beneficial to have. There's just so much, especially with the technology where it is these days, where programming is really the only way to really be impactful in terms of the research. Not to say you can't be impactful without programming skills, but it's such a nice tool in your toolbox. There's so much you can do, even in the clinic, that can simplify your life. But in any case, I love programming, so I'm hoping to get into some independent software development. In fact, I'm planning on making the leap into that probably in the next 6 months or so. And in the field of medical physics, there's some different software ideas, of course, I have. As a clinical medical physicist, there's a lot of programs that we use that, I think we could do better than this, or, and one of the ones, and in fact, I mentioned this whole data mining thing and retrospective analysis so we can learn. That's really the best way to learn is being able to look at the data. I think there's a lot that can be done. I've participated in some clinical trials as a medical physicist, providing the information to the protocol, the people running a new protocol, and will analyze, of course, this information. And there's a lot to be desired in the tools out there. So anyway, there's a lot of tools that I think are just begging to be written in this department that I think will help the field move forward in terms of making the clinical workflow better, but also I think doing more along the lines of bringing tools to those who are running these research protocols so that they can identify what the optimal treatment approaches are, and analyze the data in a much simpler fashion. And also the people who are providing data, because these protocols basically, you recruit institutions throughout the United States or beyond, and they basically submit the data that they're gathering in terms of results and follow-up, and also in terms of what was treated. All this stuff needs to be submitted into this repository. And as I said, there's a lot to be desired in that, some of the ways that it's currently being done. So anyway, that's where I hope to make a way for myself in that department. Now, medical physics, generally, I would say probably, I would say between 80 to 90% of medical physicists, I can't say for certain, but I would say that about that amount are what I would term clinical medical physicists. where you work in a radiation oncology center of some kind, either a community center or a university setting, and so you're at the clinic. You're there to help, with as I said, all those tasks. I guess I explained it already. There's just so many things that can come up, and that we get consulted about kind of throughout the day. Whenever there's any questions, we're often consulted. So that's what most medical physicists do. There are those who work for industry, the people who make these linear accelerators or the imaging systems, also I've been talking about therapeutic medical physics. There's like 3 or 4. I guess, let me think. So there's diagnostic medical physicists, and these people are the people who kind of do a lot of quality assurance, I'd say, on diagnostic machines, MRIs. You got the nuclear medicine cameras, the PET scanners, and CT scanners. They do a lot of quality assurance and X-ray systems, conventional X-rays. And then you have nuclear medicine medical physicists who get involved in the therapeutic radiopharmaceuticals that actually are injected. And among there's also this diagnostic side of that, but and then there's health physics, which is radiation protection. So anyway, there's all these different fields of medical physics, I guess. But in the therapeutic range, which is I don't know that if I'd say it's the largest. Maybe it's probably the largest fraction of all the medical or all the medical physics fields out there. But yeah, about 90% probably are doing clinical work. And then some of those, if they're working in a university setting, would be involved in some research. But about maybe 10% or so, 10 to 20 are involved full time in some sort of research position or in the industry job. So I guess I'm kind of joining this minority maybe in my plans. And we'll see where it goes. And if it doesn't go where I hope it does, then I certainly wouldn't be disappointed if I end up in the clinic again. I think it'd be great. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It also seems like you know, I'm in the IT field myself. So we have a lot of different software. I do information assurance, or I guess the hip TV term would be like cybersecurity. But we have a lot of tools, but they're all like kind of individual by themselves.
Yeah, sure.
Or they're written by people that don't actually do the job. So I think when you have something like what you do, where you do the job, day in, day out, what you're looking for, what you're reading, being able to custom build or, refine it a little bit from, being in the trenches, I guess, so to speak, would be a pretty valuable asset and would help the field out in the long term.
Definitely. I hope so. That's the idea anyway. But I'm not saying that there aren't plenty of folks out there who are great clinical physicists who also participate in the way that I'm hoping to. But yeah, you're right. I think that there's definitely a need for individuals, I think, who have that skill set to contribute in this way. Because I mean the technology nowadays that we really need, there's so much potential, I think, in harnessing it, and especially in medicine. And it's been a bit of a slow march forward, I think, compared to what could happen if the more people who are competent in the area and who I guess make the leap into that field. I think we can really make some big differences for good. But
yeah, I think every field, every job, you're always going to have that Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. You're always going to have someone that come along that'll pioneer it. And,
yeah,
and
I
make,
don't know
that giant. Yeah. There's always something, a piece of software that makes it easier, or a process flow.
Sure.
That's pretty interesting. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that's. I guess my shortest answer is I'm not sure where I'll be in 2 to 10 years, but I'm pretty confident that. Well, I can say this: I'm glad I went into medical physics, and I think that when that wherever it ends up, I think I'd be happy there. But you never know until you make the leap of faith, I guess, with my kind of plan here.
Tell you what, I think I'm pretty confident to say I know more about medical physics now than I did, before we started talking. And I think what you've gone over is pretty spectacular. So now people can know what medical physics is, know it from someone in the field, and the way you broke it down it's broken down so anyone can understand it. And I think a lot of people are going to learn from this, and I'm really appreciative of you talking to me.
Sure. No, I'm happy to do it. Certainly would love to help others understand better about what we do, because it's an important field. We of course need good people who really want to, as I said, make a difference, because like I said, there are those days where you really are the key person to make sure that a patient's treated correctly, and that's a fantastic place to be, especially if you have that passion and you're also a capable person. So I definitely hope that anyone who's interested and thinks that they fit the bill, you're definitely welcome here, in my opinion. But it's like,
who knows? Maybe in 5 years I'm talking to Alan, the software development specialist in the medical physics field.
We'll see.
New hit program.
We'll see.
Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. That's the thing about life, right? You never really know until you try. But
you gotta try.
But if you try, then try hard, right?
Yeah, always try. Don't stop trying. All right. Well, thanks a lot, man.
No problem. Take care.
Thanks for listening in today, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you don't miss that one episode that can change your career path. We're passionate about sharing all the possibilities of occupations out there, and we'd like to keep moving full steam ahead. Consider becoming a patron of the show and go to patreon.com/whatdoyoudopodcast to see how you can support the show.